Awesome, looks like we're recording. I guess we can go ahead and get started. So for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Sage. I'm a back-end 2008 student, he, him. I was a tutor in college, and I noticed at Turing that I kind of missed that like opportunity to reinforce my knowledge. So when Sydney and Mike were headed from Mod 1 to Mod 2, I reached out and said, do y'all mind if I do a practice run through of Bloody Hogwarts for both of you and see how that goes? And they offered to, or they asked if they could invite some more people from your cohort, and I think it went pretty well, hopefully. And I offered to do it again this mod. So since there are only 2 practice tests in mod 3, I thought it would be nice to kind of make something unique so you two, or all of you, still have those 2 practice tests if you'd like to go through them later. Because if I did one of those today, then it might, you have a lot less to do on your own time. So I made this Pokemon app. It's kind of similar to what I experienced on the mid mod. Is you kind of get something that already has a homepage set up. You have a search, and then what you want to do is search an API for those credentials, and then whatever you return is what we show on our index or our show page. So I don't know if everyone's cloned that by now, but if you would like to follow along, definitely go ahead and fork or clone it or both. I'll share mine. So my plan with this one was kind of to, I have like let me see, what do I have? A get started branch. So if anyone watches this recording later and wants to follow along, I'll leave the get started branch as is, and then I'll push whatever I do to the Poke API branch, and then I'll do the refactor from there. So that you all have the opportunity to follow along with this video. And also, yeah, that's my plan for the day, is just kind of go through and get the API call working in the controller, refactor it out to some helper classes, and then add some testing if we have time. And if we have time at the end, we can get into some more advanced things if everyone wants to. And then, yeah, feel free to ask any questions along the way. I'm not the best with the hand raising, so just unmute yourself and go for it. And also keep in mind that you're going to have lectures on just about every single part of this. So it might be a lot of information, but it's just to kind of get your feet wet, dip your toes in. And, if it's a lot, definitely don't feel like you need to take everything away from this, since you're going to have classes with Ian and Tim on all of these different sections. Cool. Do you have any questions before we jump in?
Do we need to have Postman open?
You don't, but I think it's good to get some practice.
Okay, cool.
Oh, cool. Yep, there's the app. So one thing I noticed in Postman that I didn't really do through a lot of Mod 3, but wish I had, is save your calls here. It's really helpful. I used it for the final project, as you can see. But it's kind of nice. You can just save your call here, make it a collection, and it's a lot better than having a ton of tabs open full of stuff you've looked at. Yeah, so Postman is basically just the main reason we use it in Mod 3 is just to make the call first in the app, so you can get the response you want, and then from there you can basically duplicate that call inside of your Rails app and know that what you're working on is working. Because if you're just kind of trying to make your call in the Rails app and it doesn't work, there's a ton of reasons it could be. So as long as you can get it working in Postman first, at least you have a successful call you're trying to duplicate. So let me kind of go through what we have to start with in this little app. I got some advice from my mentor to work on some styling, so I wanted to make this one look kind of cool. But let's see, I'll probably do some actual JavaScript with it later on. But this is what it looks like. It's basically just a home page, and then we can search for a Pokemon, and this is what the show page will look like once we add that functionality. But yeah, just kind of think of it as like a basic Rails app with just a welcome page, a search section, and a show page. Um, yeah, any questions so far? Cool. Well, here's the call I wanted to do. It's fairly simple, so you can just call the Pokemon API, and you can throw in a number, and that's like the ID of the Pokemon. So I know 150 is Mewtwo. So when we call it, we should get some information on Mewtwo, and we do. I kind of cheated because I looked through these calls beforehand, but usually you want to look through the documentation and make sure your call is getting all the information you need for what you want to show on your page. But we have Mewtwo's name, number, some images we could use, and um, I know from looking at this API, there's other information we could get if we want it. So I think just those basics will work for this one. But there's a lot of things you can do with Rails apps to add more to it. So we'll get started in the controller. So this is where we're going to want to put our API calls. And then we're going to refactor it out from there.
Just have a quick question. So
Yeah.
like that URL that you've put into Postman there, is that just like you just found that specific one in the docs, like the Pokemon form? I'm kind of scrolling through and I can't seem to find that same one, but maybe I haven't gone through it all.
Yeah, I could put it in the chat. Though like there was one in that Poke API docs that I was trying to get to work, but for some reason it didn't. So I had to kind of like go through some different calls.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, I see. So it'd just be in that. Okay.
yeah, this is the call I was trying to get to work, and it was basically giving me like this moves one returned. I don't know if that was like an error with this API, but when I called it, there was some other links here. So I tried a few of those, and eventually I got one that had some of the basics. So I can just put this one, yeah, like I said in the chat.
Yeah, it seems like half the battle is figuring out the documentation for the
Hmm.
API.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And there's some that are pretty tough. This one's pretty basic, but when you need authorization to use one or an API key, it definitely gets a little bit more confusing. But if we had a key for this one, we would put it in this application.yaml. And the way you create that is running Figaro install and from the command line, and that creates this file, and it also adds it to your git ignore. And that way you can keep that information secret, and it turns it into you can turn it into an environmental variable. Cool. Yeah, is everyone able to get that call working? Does anyone have any questions on Postman?
So Sage, when you're saving it, you're just like going to exit out of it and then saving your changes, or how are you saving it? That's go ahead.
Like,
Sorry.
sorry. Are you just asking like how to save it or like the purpose of saving it?
Right. Like, why are you saving these calls?
Just in case you want to like go back to them later. Like you see from like our final project, I had a lot of calls I was using, so it's helpful to just go back and make sure that your call to the API is still working. And then if you have calls to like your own thing, if you have it on Heroku, if you're using localhost, then you can keep like I had some that were like a little bit more in depth where I had to like put some stuff in the body here and um, it made a lot more sense to save it than it did to like type this out every time.
Okay.
Yeah, for a simple one like this, you might not need to, but um, it does get a lot more helpful later on in the mod. Cool. So let's go ahead and get our call working. So what we're going to want to do is use the Faraday gem, which should already be inside of this app. So what we can do is Faraday.get, and what that does is it calls the API. But what we're gonna, well, yeah, I'll start there, and then we can go ahead and just put our URL in here, and then set this equal to our con, which is short for connection. And we can just put our pry down here and make sure it's working so far. So that should hit it. Cool. So let's take a look at our connection. Cool. So the body is what we want to take a look at. So what we do is we parse through it with this built-in Ruby methods of JSON.parse. And first of all, so sorry, I'm not explaining this the best, but what we usually do is we create the connection here first, and then we call the API afterwards. So what we do is we do a new here, and then we say our response is our connection, and then we do the get action. So the way they've described this in class is that like here we're kind of like dialing a phone number, and then later on we're gonna actually like put like the specific call down here. So if you look at like the Poke API docs, they're all gonna have this prefix before all of them, and then this part at the end is like the different calls. So if we want to do different calls to our API, we can make separate responses for each one, and this URI is going to stay the same. So this one we can use the same con for all of our different actual responses, and then like I said, we can go ahead and parse through it. So I'm just going to make an instance variable we can use for our page, and go ahead and parse through our response. JSON.parse, and then we're going to want to do the response body, just like we did down here in the pry. So the body is where it has like our response here. And then we want to do symbolize names and true. And this will turn into a hash, and that will turn our keys into symbols that we can call in our view. So let's exit this one and go back into this pry. I'm just going to pull this one over here. JSON.parse, response.body.
Is it symbolized names? Am I thinking of that wrong? Let me look.
Symbolize names, true. That looks right to me. Probably missing something simple. Let's go again.
Just curious, if you moved your pry up one line, would it still error out? And then you could see maybe if it is in that.
Yeah, let's give it a try. Cool. And we want our, yeah, good call. Response.body. Okay, so here looks like our issue. Did I maybe take too much from this one? Maybe I didn't take enough. Okay, let's try that. Okay, cool. This looks like what we want. So now we should be able to parse through it. Cool. So now we have more of like what we actually want to show on our web page, kind of like what we got from our API call. So now with our Pokemon variable, we can call these keys to get these values to render them on our view. So let's go ahead and set up our view. Oh yeah, let's put the name up here as our title. We can capitalize the name. This needs to be in embedded Ruby tags. And what else do we want? We could probably do their ID. And then we can do maybe one of these sprites. Number. And then, yeah, let's see what it looks like at this point. Do I still have a problem there? I do not. It's interesting. I get to see like the awkward silence the professors have to deal with. Okay, so
I'm sure it's worse than we imagine, the awkward silence.
Yeah. Okay, so this should be an image tag. Cool. Let's see if that pulls it up. That did not. Front default, was that the right? Let's throw a pry in here. Oh. Cool.
Would you just have to dig like a layer deeper in the hash of like into the sprites first?
Oh yeah, thank you. That's why we use our pry. Cool, so that's that information. And then we want to get the front default. Sweet. Thanks, Sandra. Okay, cool. Let's see how that looks. Oops, keep forgetting I moved it over here. And we still have a pry. Okay, cool. So now we have these things. Let's go ahead and center them. Cool. So not a bad show page. One of the issues here is that we've hard coded it to be mute to on any page. So what we can do is we can go back to our controller, and here I know in my API call that I can search by name or number. So what I can do is just go ahead and string interpolate, and I will grab the Pokemon from my params, which is what we get from our index page when we actually search for one. So let's see what I called that. Poke search. I think it'll come up as that. Let's see if that works. Okay, it's this Pokemon. And then we can put that variable into here. Cool, so now we get whichever Pokemon we search for. So we can search by name or number. So number 2 should be Ivysaur. Cool. Any questions so far? Just keep in mind on your assessments, you're going to want to like get it working here in the controller before you refactor it out. This is kind of a basic API, but sometimes you'll have some pretty long controllers, and as you get later on in the mod, you'll have multiple API calls here. So I think for our final assessment, I had like a 30-line method here in my controller, but it's still good to get it working here. And Eon will even tell you that if you can commit it while it's working here, you'll at least get credit for getting it working. You don't want to like start refactoring before it's working and then end up with, you know, missing out on all of those points.
Sage, how are you running just that controller to hit that pry? Like without like a test to run?
Oh, just from the Rails server. I do have a test, but it's
gotcha.
kind of basic. But I'm just going to that page in the server. Since I only have 2 pages, really, is this a welcome index, and like I called it an index here because we don't really have like an ID to pass in, but it's more of a show page for each Pokemon.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any questions on getting an initial API call going? Not too bad, right?
Can you go over one more time, Sage, how you determined how much of that address you needed for the response? Like what made you go back and say like, oh, I don't have enough here?
Yeah, I just I'm actually not sure exactly like why it wasn't working, but I do know that for most of my projects, I usually go to the .com here, and then I start anything API related in the Git. And yeah, that was my mistake at first, but I do know that, you know, that's usually the way we do it, and I'm not sure how exactly it works, but like I said, I know that Ian describes it as like, this is like dialing a phone number, but you're not actually like pressing call, and then your connection here, or your response is where you actually like call the section that you need for whatever you're doing with your Rails app, if that makes sense. So I guess
Okay,
the big
yeah.
takeaway there is just go to the .com.
Okay.
Anything after that, doing your .git.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Is that helpful?
Yeah. I think that was like the hardest
Yeah.
part in our last project, was trying to figure out.
Just sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think I'm lagging a little bit. I was gonna say, I think on that same note, like it looks like it'd be easy then to take that the Faraday.new and put it in its own method. And then you can create a bunch of methods with your responses to have different like response URI requests for the same con method. So
Yep.
then like your domain never has to change and you're just sending that different request to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the next steps is in the refactor. We want to make this into basically a helper method for our call, and then we're going to pass all of our different calls in here, especially like with our final project where we have several different URIs to call to this one. So yeah, it's a really good point. Cool. Yeah, I'm sure I should follow a little bit more TDD, but yeah, we can still hit it from the Rails server. So we could just ask for like there to be a little bit more on this page. I'm sure we could probably still hit it with this one. So now that we're searching for Pikachu, we could just ask that it has that, and then number. Is Pikachu 25? Yeah, it is. Cool. All right, should we start the refactor? Are there any more questions here?
I think we're good.
Cool. I'll go ahead and push this to this branch in case like anyone watches this video and wants to start from the refactor. Then you can check out here. I'll go ahead and merge it. I can never spell when I'm screen sharing. Big issue. Cool. So I'll work off of this branch in case anyone wants to try refactoring. Oh. Well, that, dang it. Okay, I'll just rename this one later. Cool. So the first helper class I usually like to do is the PORO. So a PORO stands for plain old Ruby object. And what we do there is kind of like mod one style. We create a class with a hash, and then we can create the methods we want to call in our view. And the reason for that is because we are able to basically make changes here. Or I'll just call it Pokemon.rb. And that way, instead of like, instead of having like, okay, so if we have like we have a hash we're using and we want to change like the API we use to get that information to our pages, what we can do is just change it inside of this PORO. And if we have these Pokemon or whatever it is rendered all over our application, we would have to go through and change every single page that calls that hash. But if we have it all going through a PORO, everywhere those methods are, we can just change it here. So I'll just call this data and this will be our hash. So we'll send it into it here and we'll just call this data here as well. And we can set our Pokemon instance variable equal to our new class, Pokemon.new, and we'll pass in that hash. And this will come through here. And then we can say basically everything that was in our view page we want to make into a method. Oh, hold on here. So we can call this at name equals data name number equals CID. And again, this is a really simple call, but there will be times that you need methods down here that will actually go through the data and then put it the way you want it. And you know, various different things. And then we wanted this capitalized, so we can just copy our capitalize here. And that's another benefit to these PORO classes is that we can make the changes we want here instead of in the view itself. So now we can just call these Pokemon.name. This will be Pokemon.number. And this will be .image. We'll add these to our adder reader here so that we can call these throughout our file. Cool, so in theory, this should still work. I believe we still have our server going. So let's look for John Manager. Pokemon.new. Yeah, you'll get to see a lot of errors today, so you'll be good when you see it, when you go through the troubleshooting steps on your own. Pokemon.new. I might just have to restart my server. Okay, I think I hit my pry this time. So, cool. So just make sure you're restarting your server. Cool, so this works, and then we can do whatever we want here. So if we want to like upcase Pokemon names throughout our website, we can just change it in one spot. So a lot of things we can do with POROs that will make maintaining a larger Rails app a lot easier than like doing this on the view and calling our API everywhere, or calling the hash of the API. I'll make better capitalized. Any questions about the PORO? I know this is a really simple one, but this is, you know, the basics of what you'll need to do with POROs throughout the mod. It helped me to just think of it like a mod 1 test. Oh yeah, go for it.
I was gonna ask a quick question. Moving forward, when these POROs get more complex, is it cleaner to instantiate an object like this, or would it be better to like call class methods on your Pokemon class to just fetch information without creating the object?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have had some where I've made class methods inside of here, but usually I feel like instance methods make more sense for these.
Okay,
yeah, that's a good question.
cool, thank you.
Yeah, I guess it's just helpful to think of it like a model. Like, do we want to do that to multiple Pokemon objects or just one? And here it's just one that we're going to be going through. So that's the first part of our refactor. The next part is called a facade. And the way Ian described it is like the controller is like the CEO of a business and he doesn't want to do the information himself. He wants to delegate it out. So a facade is like where we're going to be doing the work for our call. So what we'll do is we'll create another folder called facades. I always do this plural in case we have multiple. We can call this PokeFacade.rb. And what we want to do is just take the bulk of this, put it into our facade. And this one will be a class method. So I use this syntax for class methods. It basically makes everything inside of this block a class method instead of doing the dot self. Either way is fine. And we'll give this an argument of the Pokemon we want. And then we'll add that here. So we have our instance variable and we'll call Pokemon. Yeah. And we'll pass in our Pokemon from our params. And then we can comment all of this out. Okay, so in theory, this should still work as well. We don't need an instance variable there. So we're just going to return the object. So let's see if this is still working. Okay, again, I think we just need to restart our server. Controller down here. Cool, there's our meal. Okay, we didn't pass anything in. Cool, so now we can delete this in this extra line. So now we're down to a 2-line controller. I'm getting some slacks, give me 1 second. And then the last part of the refactor we want to do is we don't want to do our call directly in the facade. We want to pass this out to a service. So again, we're going to go 1 step farther and copy all of this. And then we're going to dream drive it a little bit. So we're going to say our data is what we get from a service. We're going to call it Poke service. Call for Pokemon, and we're going to pass in our Pokemon again from our params. So then we can comment this out. Go ahead and create our services folder. And again, the syntax just turns everything inside of this block into class methods. So just imagine there's a self dot here.
That's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it's helpful too, especially as you get to like the consultancy project when you have like a ton of class methods, and your final project when you have a lot of stuff going on inside of these. Again, this is a really simple API call, but I just wanted to kind of, like I said, dip everyone's toes in and kind of get the idea out there. Okay, I didn't copy. Or I think I copied. All right, let's go ahead and make sure it's still working at this point. Cool. And then we can make this into some helper methods as well. So just like I believe James said earlier, we can turn this into its own method of our connection. And this one's I put in the private since we're not going to reference this method outside of this class. So this is always just going to live here. And then I also go ahead and refactor this line out as well. So you can call this whatever you want. I usually call it parse data. And it takes a response. So then we can just call that here. And we no longer need this line. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and see if we're still getting our call. Cool. So everything's still working at this point, and we have a successful refactor. We have a facade that does the work for our controller. It's basically calling the service and then creating that hash into an object. We have our service that actually does the initial API call, and we have our PORO. So like I said here, we can manipulate our responses from the hash before they get to the view. Do we have any questions at this point?
I was just gonna say that's really clean. Is this kind of like a structure that you typically follow, where you would go from your controller to a facade and then to the like service and the PORO?
Yeah, this is the this is pretty much the exact structure you'll follow throughout the entire mod. It's it might seem like a lot at first, or some of you might get it immediately. Definitely depends, but those, if you can get those 3 classes down, that's pretty much it. And then once you're creating APIs that other people can call, then you also add serializers. So that'll just be another folder with like Poke serializer, and we'll turn our data into like a way that it can be viewed in JSON for like a front end app to grab it. But for the most part, those are going to be your main helper classes.
That makes sense. So you're like consuming an API and then also providing an API as a service, and then you're serializing the JSON. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So right now we could do like an additional call to like Giphy or something and get like a GIF of the Pokemon, and then we could add that to our PORO here instead of making it its own PORO, and then we could run that through a serializer, and then we could basically send that all out as one response, with like more simple data with like a GIF of that Pokemon. And
Okay.
yeah, that way another app could grab that, or another person in Postman.
Nice. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what the final project will be. Not to give too much of a spoiler, but it's a lot of like grabbing information from several different APIs and then getting it in the format you want it, and then running it in a JSON format and sending it out.
Can we see the service one more time? I don't know why
Yeah.
mine's not doing it.
Absolutely. So yeah, like I showed, I always follow the same steps of like checking with the server or with my test to make sure it's still working, and then just kind of refactor it line by line.
Why did you make the con and the parse data private methods again?
Because these aren't being called outside of this class. Because we're like, if we had another facade or another call inside our facade where we want like different data, like moves of each Pokemon or something like that, then we're just gonna add another method to our facade, and it's gonna call another method up here. But we're not gonna need to change these at all. These are just gonna be called inside of here by these methods, which are kind of like the endpoint for our API
Okay.
calls.
And then because you're doing that class and like and shoveling in the self or inheriting from self, you can't do an instance method in this class, correct?
I would just have to go after this block. So anything here would be an instance method.
Cool.
Since it's
Okay.
outside of this. Yeah, it's just inside of this block where they're all class methods, and then this would be an instance method right here.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, I mean, if it helps you as well, you can definitely do like the self on all of these and not do this.
No, I like what you did. I didn't do that part. I don't know how, because mine wasn't working, and then I was like, oh, I don't have line 2, so that works.
Oh, okay, gotcha, nice.
Perfect.
Cool. Glad it's
Thank
working.
you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
I do. I mean, I have a ton.
Oh, cool. Yeah, go for it.
So I'm having a really hard time with like this giant hash. How did you know that these sprites were your images? I mean, I know you can see like the PNG ending, like the dot ping. So you know it's an image, but like, how did you, I guess my question is like, how did you figure that out?
I guess it's because I
Go ahead.
Probably have too much information on Pokemon, but I know they're called sprites in the game. So when I saw this call, I'm like, oh, cool, it has name, ID, and because that's why it's like an 8-bit image, because it's like a sprite from like one of the video games.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just was like, was that something I was supposed to learn? Sprites making images. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I think with most API calls, it's just gonna say like image URL or something.
Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. That's another area where you can just mess around with it too. You can just like go ahead and, or I think if you do command click, it just opens it as an image. Yeah, it does. So you can just click on the URLs and see if they take you somewhere else or if they actually return an image. And that's the good thing about Postman too, is that you can really just mess around with anything in here before you actually put it into your Rails app. Because if you're hitting issues in the Rails app, it could be a ton of different things. But in Postman, you're just getting, you're just doing your call, making sure it works, and then making sure these give you what you want them to give you before you even take it to your Rails app. Which is why Postman becomes such a powerful tool at the end of the mod, or like halfway through and onward.
Okay.
Especially in the consultancy project. I don't know if I've shown you all mine, but it was kind of cool. We have this get the flight out, and basically we call flight API and a weather API, and we hard coded 4 or 5 airports into here so that we can just make it a little bit simpler for us. But then we can pick how long we want the trip to be. So the point of the app was to be like kind of like a simple way to look for a trip just based on like price. So it just shows you like the cheapest flights. It doesn't even pick like where you want to go to. We just have like just these basic fields, and then lucky location just gives you one response, and then we have Google OAuth. So if they sign in, then you can search for more locations. And we did some JavaScript here to get this little plane to move. And this is 4 apps. On this project, we have a Rails front end, a Rails back end, and then 2 Sinatra microservices that are actually calling the APIs. So I don't know. We made it through the first round in Code Fair, and we're heading to the whatever the second round is called, demo comp. So we might be making some changes to it right now. That might be the reason it's down. But yeah, this one has a lot going on inside of it since it's 4 different Rails apps or Ruby applications. And Postman makes life a lot easier when it gets a lot more complex. And there's a lot you can do with these too. Like if we wanted to, like I said, we could add like a Giphy call or some other type of call that takes like information we get back from the Pokemon and gives you something else. We could maybe in our when we call these Pokemon and we go through them as objects, we could save them to like our database and make a table for our Pokemon. So that way we have the information saved and don't need to make as many API calls in the future. Yeah, there's a lot we can do with this. So this is just kind of like, bare bone basics to kind of visualize what you can do with API calls.
Sweet. Thank you, Sage. This was awesome.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I definitely recommend going through the Parks Finder if you all have time over the break or maybe in the first couple weeks. That's the mid-mod practice assessment, and it's a really similar structure to this. So definitely see if you can get it working in the controller, refactor it out to these same 3 helper classes, and do your tests.
I know you literally just said it. What's it called?
I think it's just, let me pull it up.
Okay.
I think it's called Parks Finder, but I think on the mod 3 page it's just called practice assessment.
I forgot.
Mid-mod practice assessment.
It's probably not too hard to find.
Yeah, it's this one, mid-mod practice assessment, and it goes to Parks Finder. And this one calls like a national parks API, and I think you just search by state and then return the parks from that. So it's a little bit more complex than this one. I don't think it needs an API key, so it won't be too much more. But yeah, if you all try and need some help, definitely feel free to reach out. And then this final practice assessment is really helpful. I did it over the 2 weeks off we had last mod for like winter break. But if you all have a chance, this one's a really good one, even if you do it like really early, and then you could redo it again with like different APIs or something that would make sense. But what this one does is you take the Open Weather API, the Giphy API, and then you have a destination in your database, and then you create endpoints so other people can call your app in Postman or in another application, and you create endpoints for the destination, and then you get the information you want out of weather and Giphy and create that into endpoints as well. And that one's really helpful for the final project, but just for the mod in general. But yeah, I'm a big fan of those practice tests.
Is that final more along the lines of like creating an API? Is that kind of what?
Yeah, it's kind of the idea is that you're creating like a backend application that you would send to a front end.
Cool.
So, you use multiple APIs, and then you create the endpoints that the front end would want, formatted the way they would want it. And then you also have like, stuff like authorization, like a user can log in and be stored in your backend, and then you can send back the information that, tells the front end that they're logged in, or they can use to make them logged in. And then as far as testing, I don't think I'm gonna actually like show you what it looks like, but basically in PORO, you'd want to do like a mod 1 type test of like basically like the initialize, like this is an instance of, and then that each of these methods return what you want it to return. For the facade, you want to return like somewhat of like what the data type is. So you want to say it's like a hash, and you want it to have like a certain amount of keys, which you can get from Postman. And then from when you test your service, I believe that's where I get a little more in depth of like actually going through the hash, and then I like have a test for each thing I want. So I say like expect it to have key ID and expect key of ID to be an integer, and then same with name. Expect it to have key name, expect that to be a string, expect it to have sprites, expect that to be a hash. So basically, you want to test for 2 lines for everything you want, and you want it to like say you expect it to have the key, and then you expect the key to be like that data type.
Just curious, do you use like VCR and WebMock to test all of this stuff?
Yeah, those are super helpful, and you'll have a lecture on those, but basically those just for anyone who doesn't know, they create like a mocked response from your API so that you are not calling your API every single time you run your test. So it definitely helps out when you have APIs that can only be called a certain amount of times, especially with like the consultancy project where you have 10 people working together and we're all just calling those same APIs constantly.
I'm curious, just like I know there's different uses for both, and like from my understanding, VCR is like really nice in like a professional setting in case the API information changes. I guess like, do you have a preference on which one you like more? It seems like you can kind of do either one depending.
Right. Yeah, I definitely liked WebMock more at first, but once I got more used to VCR, it's a little bit quicker, a little bit simpler because it saves the response for you as opposed to you going in and saving it. All you have to do is just make sure you delete your VCR file every time you rerun it, or every time you make a change to your test, because it'll save the new call. Cool. Well, that's all I really planned for today, was just kind of show like the basics of getting a call working and then refactoring it. Does anyone want to see anything different, or it's been an hour, so we can call it here. All right, additional questions?
I have an unrelated question if nobody else has anything.
Go for it.
Do you mind, Sage, if I share your Mod 2 walkthrough of Bloody Hogwarts with 2011 and in the repeater channel?
Oh yeah, not at all.
Cool. It's happening.
Nice.
I will tag you, so if you see multiple tags, that's what's happening.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I always appreciate the opportunity to tutor a little bit because it definitely helps me to understand the concepts better. So let them know they can reach out if they have questions on that.
Cool.
Cool. Any other questions? Everyone good on API call basics?
Yeah, I don't have anything more here, Sage, but thank you so much for spending time on this. This has been really helpful.
Yeah,
No
thank you,
problem.
Sage.
Thank you, Sage.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I the host? Okay, cool. I think I am. I'll go ahead and make sure this is recorded, and I'll send it to probably Sydney, or maybe it's your channel directly.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. All right, y'all. Guess I'm gonna head out. Have a great rest of your break.
Well, hold on. I will be reaching out because I'm going to try that other one. So just